It's still raining. How do we feel about my new pillows? A little pop of color? Hey, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're changing things up a little bit and getting personal and diving into my relationship a bit. So this video is about my experience as a neurotypical partner in a relationship with someone on the spectrum. And if you are in a relationship like this, or think you might be, I think it will be helpful just to hear about. Brandon was actually diagnosed with Asperger's, which they now broadly call Autism Spectrum Disorder, as well as ADHD. Obviously, there are many ways autism can manifest, and as it is a spectrum, there are very high-functioning, high IQ members, and that is where my partner's at. In fact, when we first met, I had no idea that he was on the spectrum. So I thought I would share a bit about our journey and my experience being in a relationship with him. So the idea for this video came from thinking about 5 years ago when Brandon and I had been dating for maybe 4 months, and I was getting the inkling that there might be things in our relationship that were different than in my past relationships. How we communicated, the openness of it, just overall felt a bit off. And as a person who does not like not addressing issues, having studied psychology at university, and who was just 10 out of 10 in love with my partner, I wanted to fix things and get to the bottom of what was going on because I was a bit confused and it was actually just stressing me out quite a bit. So after talking to some family members, I found out he had been diagnosed with Asperger's as a child, but it really wasn't spoken about after that, and he probably wasn't even aware of it. So of course I started researching Asperger's and was pretty horrified by what I read. There were just the nastiest posts about relationships that didn't work out, and ex-partners speaking very unkindly, saying basically that neurotypical partners would never be satisfied in a relationship with someone with Asperger's. It was all honestly very disheartening, and I thought surely it's not gonna work out. But hey, we have done a lot of work, made a lot of progress, and it's been over 5 years. We've really managed to embrace it and done a lot of learning. Not that there isn't lots ahead, but we are engaged to be married this year and we are very happy. And I think it's really important to get out there a positive story, because if you're in a situation like I was and looking for advice or some perspectives to relate to, there's just not a lot out there. It doesn't represent every situation. So now that you have the backstory, I thought I would share some details about how someone with Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD, and or ADHD might be in a relationship based on my experiences. So one of the things I noticed was that Brandon was a real catch-22, in the routine department at least. So with autism, typically the person loves routine, and any kind of deviation kind of throws them into a tailspin. Well, with being so bright and coupled with the ADHD, he gets bored very easily and has a variety of interests. I mean, if I listed them all, it would take the rest of this video. And that is part of what makes him so attractive to me. But this, coupled with the need for routine, not the want for sure, but the need, it gets a little tricky. So we try to establish kind of a structured plan to things, but just with the bones of it, and then a lot of wiggle room inside of that plan, if that makes sense, just to satisfy both aspects. I had to learn about this and kind of take the role of director of the show in a way, and of that wonderful energy he has, which happens to work really well because I love planning. It is funny though, this may go with the routine thing, that sometimes it's also him just being used to how things are a certain way, and then there's a change. I really need to communicate that really clearly to let him kind of get used to the new way of things. Like, that transition isn't super fast, I guess. But it's sometimes with things that take me completely off guard, that I wouldn't think he cares about, like moving a trinket that's been in one spot for a long time and then it moves, and it's just funny what gets noticed, and he doesn't like that. Or we're on a trip and I've told him where we need to shop, but I add another place to the list. Like, he remembers somehow the 5 places we're going in his mind and knows that this new place is not or was not on the list. Things like that. By the way, if you enjoy videos like this and would like to see more on autism, and in my relationship specifically, please subscribe to my channel and give me a like. It would really help support me. Something else I had to get used to was that our humor didn't always 100% line up. I tend to be very sarcastic at times and use exaggeration or incongruencies that he might take more literally. For instance, I was making a video the other week and he watched it before I posted it just to make sure there weren't any major problems. And he was a bit concerned that I said, I'm not quite sure how to tell a kilogram from a pound. Isn't a pound like 62.5 kilograms or something? I was just kidding, but he thought I should probably correct it because a pound is not 62.5 kilograms, to which I said, I'm trying to be funny here. Now, like I mentioned before, the ADHD makes it a bit more challenging, and one of the ways it does in communication is that he may change subjects out of the blue. No segue, no warning. Now, I have learned that no, this does not mean he's dismissing what I'm saying or not listening to me most of the time. But it can be very abrupt, so I've just reminded myself that his brain is going a mile a minute, maybe 10 or 20 miles a minute, and far faster than he can articulate the words to express them. So I try to remember that and just ask out of curiosity because it often is very interesting to me. Like, how did you get from telling me about the firewood to the next sentence being today's international cryptocurrency issue that I promise I'm not going to understand? After we'd been in a relationship for a little while and we got more comfortable with each other, I did notice that when we communicated, he often didn't look at me in the eyes. It would either be at a part of me somewhere, which I thought, oh gosh, is he like noticing some guacamole on my face or on my shirt or something? I remember asking if I had something on my face a lot. Or he'd be looking at something entirely else as if he was like trying to figure out how it worked while I was talking to him, like face kind of scrunched up. It's actually kind of cute. He's also an engineer, so that makes sense, but also annoying because I didn't have any indication if he was listening or not. So then I started asking, are you listening? And yes, he could repeat back verbatim what I said, but it did still leave me feeling a bit unheard. So since finding out about his diagnosis, I understand more why eye contact can be tricky, and he also knows that I really appreciate that eye contact to feel connected and heard. It's a work in progress for us both, but it's loads better. Another thing that used to bother me before I understood a bit more about autism and ADHD was that he would be very obsessed with a subject or interest, which would drastically take his attention away from our relationship. Now, at the time, I really took this as he had lost complete interest in me because it was at the beginning of our relationship where we really needed to bond, and it made me feel terribly alone, not a priority, and really hate whatever subject or person he was solely concentrated on. When he started a new subject to be obsessed with, I realized the pattern, and after learning that this is very typical of his diagnosis, it made a lot more sense. And I didn't have to take it so personally. We were able to talk about it, and eventually he would involve me in whatever it was as well, and now has a much more balanced approach. It's not one or the other. Now, we have made tremendous strides in our relationship. Like I said, we're very happy now and have worked through so much. Actually, I think we've discovered a lot about each other as well as ourselves, which makes our relationship way stronger. Because all relationships are mirrors of ourselves, and in that way they can show us what we need to work on and can bring up things we didn't know were in us. In that way, we can use them as vehicles for improvement and growth, and I'm just so glad to have figured out how to do so with Brandon. I think at the end of the day, it really boils down to the willingness to change and compromise, which I think is really rare, and why I think there's so much literature out there that's negative about neurodiverse relationships. But if you are in a similar situation, or maybe you are suspecting you or your partner might be on the spectrum or have ADHD, I just don't want you to lose hope. There are many positive stories, and they just aren't out there yet. So in the next video, I'd really like to give you guys some tips I have after coming this far from all that we did and learned that was really helpful for us. But if you have any questions or would like any specific videos on this subject, I'd love to make them and be a resource for you. Just leave them in the comments below. I want you to know that you're definitely not alone, even if no one seems to understand what you're going through. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I make new ones every single week. I'd love for you to come on this journey with me. We'll see you next week. Bye! Representative? And that just isn't truly representative. It's just not representative of It is funny though. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe 10 or 20 miles, maybe 10 or 20 miles a minute, maybe 10 or 20 miles and far faster than can our